the yield on 2-year U.S. government bonds has come up significantly. You could buy a 2-year U.S. government bond today. I'm recording this on July 20th of 2022, and your yield is approximately 3.2%. That means for the next 2 years, you're going to earn interest of 3.2%. At the end of the 2 years, you would have to decide what to do with that money, similar to if you had purchased a fixed annuity.
Are you ready for a successful retirement? We're addressing the topics facing today's retirees. Welcome to Retire with Ryan. Now here's your host, Ryan Morrissey.
Welcome back. This is episode 107. In this week's episode, we're going to address a listener question that asks, what is better for my retirement account? Purchasing a fixed annuity or purchasing individual bonds? If you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that I have addressed both topics in a few episodes. Regarding fixed annuities, in episode 58, we talked about 4 things to know before buying a fixed annuity. And in episode 98, we talked about owning individual bonds versus owning bond mutual funds. The reason this listener wrote in is that they read a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, which I'll put a link in the show notes, by Leslie Schism. And the article was titled, Investors Pile into Fixed Annuities. It was in the July 16th edition of the Wall Street Journal. And the article mentions how rates on fixed annuities, which had been rather low, under 2%, have now risen in the 3 to 4% range. And as a result of this rise in interest rates, and in addition to both bond and stock funds going down this year, they are seeing record sales in fixed annuities. And they reference one company, New York Life, that has now eclipsed their previous record of annuity sales that, I guess not surprising, was set back in the fourth quarter of 2008 at the peak of the financial crisis. So if you're somebody who is considering purchasing a fixed annuity, I thought it'd be a good idea to give you some of the pros and the cons, and also give you an alternative that could also be appropriate, and that is buying individual bonds. So let's talk first about the fixed annuity, some of the pros. Obviously, as we talked about the rates have come up on these fixed annuities, so that is a pro. You can enjoy a very competitive yield on this money, anywhere from 3 to 4%, if we're talking about a 3-year fixed annuity. And that rate depends on the company you're dealing with. It also depends upon the amount of money that you're investing. So your interest rate will be set for that time frame if you picked 3-year. And why am I saying 3-year? I think 3-year, if you were going into one of these products, would be a good option because, as I've discussed in other episodes, we have record high rates of inflation right now in the U.S. Our Federal Reserve is doing their best to try to stop this inflation, and the way that they're doing that is by raising interest rates. And they've already said that they're going to raise interest rates 0.75% at their next meeting that's occurring in a month. And there's no idea how much more they'll raise interest rates. So there could be a number of interest rate increases over the next couple years. And this 3 to 4% annuity, although it sounds like a good rate now, maybe in a couple years from now, might not be as good of a rate if we do still see higher inflation and higher interest rates. So you don't want to buy an investment that's too long-term in the fixed income side right now because of the fear of rising rates. Now, unfortunately, there are a number of negatives, and that's really why I wanted to address this topic. One being that anytime you buy an annuity, you have some type of a commitment period where your money is tied up for a number of years. So if it was a 3-year annuity, your money would be tied up for 3 years, meaning that if you want access to the principal of your investment, you have to pay some type of a penalty. Depending on the annuity, some annuities allow you to take out up to 10% of the amount that you invest penalty-free, and anything above that, there would be a penalty. And that depends on the annuity company, but it could be anywhere from 7 to 9% penalty in the first few years. And then after you've met the term of the annuity, in this example, we're saying 3 years, there's no penalty. You could take your money out and you could do whatever you want with it. But that penalty applies to those first 3 years. Additionally, there's also something called a market value adjustment, an MVA. And I'll also put a link in the show notes to a greater explanation of how that works. But essentially, if you're trying to take more money out than the amount you can take out penalty free, in our example, it was 10%, and interest rates have increased since you purchased your annuity, then the company will charge you an additional penalty to take this money out of the annuity. Now, why are they doing this? Because, as you probably know, when interest rates rise, bond prices go down. And that would negatively impact the money that the insurance company has taken from you to create this annuity. So if you're wondering, well, how is the insurance company giving me a rate of, let's say, 3%? How can they do that? Well, they're taking your money that you put in the annuity and they're investing it in something else that's going to earn them more than 3%, some other type of bond or fixed investment. That's how insurance companies make money. They make money on the spread. They figure out how much they can invest their own money at, and then they pay you a lesser amount, and they collect that difference, and that's their profit. So that if you're requiring or requesting your money early, they're going to have to sell the bond investment that they made early as well. And because interest rates have risen, the price of that bond will go down. So they're going to take a loss on that. Therefore, they have to pass that loss on to you. So that if you're buying one of these fixed annuities, you want to be pretty certain that you're not going to need this money before the time frame of the annuity is up. So if it's 3 years before the 3 years, it was 5 years before the 5 years. So that is definitely, unfortunately, another negative. The third negative I would say is that there is additional paperwork anytime you're opening an annuity. And if you're trying to do this with retirement funds, and let's say you have your retirement funds with another company that not the annuity company you're thinking of working with, that requires some paperwork, opening a new account, transferring things over. So that is an additional, I guess, necessity. You could say it's a negative, but there is some more work to do that. So let's compare that now with one of the alternatives, and that would be buying individual bonds. And as an investor, just like interest rates have come up and allow you to get a more competitive interest rate or return on the fixed annuity investments, the same is also true for bond investments. And we're going to focus today on buying either U.S. government bonds or corporate bonds. Both are options. So that if you had an existing investment account or brokerage account and you wanted to take some cash in there or maybe sell an investment and purchase either a U.S. government bond or a corporate bond, it's very easy to do that. As long as you're dealing with a brokerage firm, and we'll talk about the big three independent, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, or Charles Schwab, all of them allow you to buy individual bonds in your account. Additionally, right now, the yield on 2-year U.S. government bonds has come up significantly. You could buy a 2-year U.S. government bond today. I'm recording this on July 20th of 2022, and your yield is approximately 3.2%. That means for the next 2 years, you're going to earn interest of 3.2%. At the end of the 2 years, you would have to decide what to do with that money, similar to if you had purchased a fixed annuity. But that means that you can invest 1 year less than you would with a fixed annuity in our example, and you're getting a very similar yield. Additionally, U.S. Treasuries don't have much risk. If any, the U.S. government would have to default and go bankrupt for you to not get back your money. Similar with an annuity, those investments would have to go bankrupt. And there's also liquidity. This is a big advantage with the U.S. Treasuries. You can sell these bonds anytime you'd like, and there isn't a penalty. However, just like I mentioned before about the market value adjustment, if you were to sell your U.S. government bond and interest rates had gone up, you most likely would sell your bond at a loss because the price of the bond would go down in value. So keep that in mind that if you are buying one of these bonds, you probably want to believe that whatever the time frame is that you're buying, you can hold the bond until that maturity. And if you do that, you'll get back exactly what you invested in the bond. So there won't be any principal loss on making that investment. You also could go into the corporate bond side. Now you're taking on some more risk, but you could get an even higher yield if you wanted to buy individual corporate bonds. For example, I was looking at 2-year U.S. corporate bonds, and I saw rates of around 3.9%, some even over 4%. Now, granted, these are corporations, they carry more risk. These are investment grade companies, but it is possible to get even a higher yield than a U.S. Treasury bond. And that's something you'd have to decide, are you comfortable with this risk? So this would be if you're using existing retirement accounts, couple options on how you could take advantage of this rise in interest rates. If you've been in bond funds and you've seen a loss in the value of those bond funds, it could make sense to take the loss on those funds and get into an investment that's paying you a fixed rate of interest to prevent any further losses. As I mentioned before, the Federal Reserve has signaled that they're going to continue increasing interest rates for their foreseeable future. And as that happens, most likely that will cause further losses in your bond funds. By buying individual bonds or fixed annuities, you can prevent those losses because those investments are not going to see losses as long as you hold them until the maturity of whatever the time frame that you buy. But that will require you to make some changes. If you have taxable money, meaning money outside of your retirement account, and you're looking to do something with that, I'll just briefly talk about the trade-off between buying treasuries or buying annuities. The major advantage of buying any annuity, in this case a fixed annuity, is that any interest you receive is deferred inside of the annuity. So if you buy a fixed annuity, let's say paying you 3% interest, and you earn that interest over the next year, you don't have to pay tax on that interest at the end of the year. You can leave that money in the annuity and you can keep earning money on that annuity, and you can keep that annuity until you die. It would only be upon your death that your beneficiaries would have to then pay tax on the interest you've received. So if you're trying to build up that money for the next generation, it's kind of maybe an emergency fund, or maybe it's money you've set aside to pay for long-term care expenses, something that you aren't planning to use anytime soon, then the annuity can benefit you because as far as helping you to not pay tax on that money in the long run. Your family will pay tax on that money when they inherit it, but you won't. Whereas if you buy, let's say, U.S. Treasury bonds, the interest you earn on those bonds is taxable to you every year. The advantage of U.S. Treasuries over corporate bonds are that currently income you receive from U.S. Treasuries is not subject to state income tax if you happen to live in a state like I live in Connecticut, where we have state income tax. So if you're earning, let's say, 3% interest on a U.S. Treasury bond and you have 6% state income tax, then you won't pay that state income tax. You would pay federal tax, but not state income tax. Where with corporate bonds, all of the income that you receive would be subject to both state and federal tax. So that's definitely a negative over the annuity and something you'd have to weigh. And additionally, too, as a reminder, anytime you're buying an annuity, if you're not yet 59 and a half years old, you have to consider that if you want to access these funds before 59 and a half, then you're going to be subject potentially to an additional 10% penalty on top of any income tax that you owe by accessing this money early. So even though you're able to defer the money in the annuity, when you take it out, it is taxable to you. And again, if you're not reached the age of 59 and a half, you'll also have to pay that 10% penalty. So something to consider, depending on the money that you're considering investing for these different scenarios. So I hope this helps give you a handle on whether you should consider using fixed annuities or individual bonds for some of your retirement money. And if you have a listener question you'd like to submit for consideration on a future episode, you can go to retirewithryan.com and then click on the contact form and submit your question for consideration. Thanks for listening this week. I look forward to talking with you next Wednesday. Take care.
You should consult a financial advisor familiar with your specific circumstances before you make any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mention of rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Ryan Morrissey, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Morrissey Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor.